We didn't talk.
Okay.
I didn't talk about it.
I did this one,
Oh, okay, I didn't want to, not even asking Kansas to make copies.
Hey, what's going on?
Hit it.
Hey, if you go to the SBA website.
Oh.
And then, the tie it, just.
Get a big picture.
The SBA website, I still think.
It is, it is.
And
And then you go from there. I think you guys are all good.
Just does? Okay, no worries.
Oh, that's a nice picture.
Like I said, I just didn't want to be.
She already ready to go on there? Is that what she's there for?
She's muted, yeah, but she's a,
No, hysterical. Thank you.
She-
I know, I like it. Yeah, I saw, I was gonna watch it turn on.
Okay.
I was here really.
It's pretty neat.
I said, does Rodney need to be here? No.
Picture.
We're gonna put him on his own, like figure it out.
well, we're big time now, guys. We're fancy.
Your
I
fancy.
know.
Yeah, there's like 3
Fancy's
microphones
fancy.
in there and all kinds of stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Is this one of the new boards?
No, it's just a new camera.
Oh, just new camera?
That's cool.
And,
And microphone. So these
Hey
mic-
guys,
work. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Rachel. Oh, man, now we gotta stop talking about her.
can you hear me?
Will we be?
We can see you and we can see your picture. We don't
Okay,
see-
good.
So,
So would you unmute the picture so we can see you?
No,
and share your screen.
You sound a little iffy on that. Is there any chance that you're gonna unmute the camera?
Operate it from up there.
No.
Okay, just
So
checking.
how will it be best to see?
Mr. Richter called, he's not coming tonight, he's going to Carlisle. I guess they're.
Well, we do have hard copies.
But do we want people to see
I
it?
didn't see any press.
Well, probably, I think it's where, I think that.
I Googled it,
we need
yes.
upstairs. So let me share it with you. Yeah,
So,
share it.
Larry Hook is leaving Carlisle to be
Let's share it.
superintendent at
It's
Springbrook
actually
Community College.
just-
Oh, really? So it's gonna, what's supposed to happen, I don't know if it's been officially happened or not, is then, you're that first sheet project signature, but you'll be socially distanced.
Board account is gonna be like a board account, versus a Zoom account. And
No
so
problem, I think
we
it's.
should have some share, which is board.
You got a quick reminder, didn't you?
We're gonna, I was gonna say, we would. Well, yeah.
Dr. Vale.
Because Robert's gonna be running around
Reinberg,
after.
They logged back into the machine,
So
so
we said, I'm
that's not mine,
saying.
it's gonna read superintendent.
Maybe just send it to me.
And then Dale's gonna be the interim for a year.
I'm surprised he didn't wait just to get his building open.
Well, he was retired,
I need to
he was
pull
one
up
year old,
I
retired.
don't need
Oh.
I don't need the flag this time, do I?
And Dr. Vale.
'Cause we have the flag.
Well, we need to, so he was gonna be where we want it. No, not there.
Live stream.
That's all trickles
Just wanna
down,
test the
that
live
was
stream?
Thursday, I guess
Go
Thursday.
ahead,
they
start
had
the
a-
live stream.
Yeah,
Nobody's
right,
gonna be on.
one, two.
Yeah, we could, and then.
Thursday, we did 4 o'clock hours,
Okay.
and then Carlisle said.
We will need I just have to pull up the what you call it, the post-it note for when they go into executive session.
A lot of stuff going on, but it's 2 years and it was, I don't know,
School.
I just.
depends on what he does.
Okay,
He stays or if there's-
I put it in there in case for some reason I had to do it and I wasn't there anymore. Yeah.
That was
There is the
important
lovely
because
flag.
Gary was interim.
Yep, they're both in there.
Yeah.
I just
I'll wait
referenced
you
that.
out.
We'll be back
I'll do what I
soon.
do and wait you out.
Okay, what are we doing?
I
now?
just a heads up, you all are gonna be very, very disappointed in tonight's presentation due to the Zoom.
Okay.
We will not have,
Or
the
live
leg
stream,
one.
I'm sorry.
Not even in here?
not even here, because he won't
So
be
it's
appointed to the board. Now, if you hold your paper up, maybe you
It's
can
fine,
just
we
let
can-
it.
We'll just go.
And we also had, Jim, are you gonna tell the surprise? He's taken he bought 19
I swear.
of those car tickets to Garth Brooks, and so he's taking everybody in Hampton Bays.
Which that could be good though, because we can have, I don't want the window.
He took it so well. He was telling the
Is it an
story.
HP
and he
video
was-
or a video HP? I've never.
Because it was acting up, because it had this error, so he did retry. And he said, I don't know how many times I hit it, and he'd be sitting there talking to
Normally I have to look it
you.
up every single time.
15.
And then it should be,
Yes, due to a technical error, I purchased 19 tickets to the Garth Brooks concert on the 27th.
Did they were
Error.
Exactly.
Those were like $100 a piece. Yes, they were. So I had 19 unique charges on my credit card.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, they said.
Well, I tell you what I did, I like, it was hilarious. And I said, Jim, you're taking a lot better than I am. It was a lot more upset.
Well, I said that, well, of course, you can't talk to anybody, all their customer service is via email, so I can write an email explaining what happened. But then they sent an email
Because
out.
we don't
there
post the
evening
video.
that said that it
Like the recording of the.
must have been a common occurrence, because it happened to numerous people. So they-
Was it sharply worded email?
So sharply worded?
Yes.
Looks, yeah.
They said only 7 individuals bought tickets.
Yeah, exactly. Somehow we sold out.
I would have broke $100 a pop, and I got 19.
Plug in.
I offered, well, see, I
pick up
That
us.
is my wife.
I see, here was wow. I start off and I'll buy, when it was free, I'd buy one for $50. Take off in. By the time you had 19, I was down to
So
a
what
dollar.
you do is.
I thought it was better than nothing, you know, because apparently you get them anywhere. They weren't as valuable as getting
I don't want to
19
leave
out
it
of them.
too long.
Yeah.
Of course.
And I put the
Wait till they
post
come out.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
because Lori and my children just know that they're going to
It is funny now.
And I told me, the best thing would be funny, I'm funny right now.
The executive session tomorrow, right? Okay, just making sure.
I can look at the attendance.
Andy, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Friday.
My computer decided.
Oh, yeah. It'll show you.
Graduated in English.
Shane was a senior.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
His wife was 51.
Gotcha.
So now we need to record. Did I just record this?
They don't record executive sessions.
Lori's ordering this because Lori is. right.
Yeah, because we're virtual. Yeah, in future sessions, we won't
Are you
have to
two ready?
worry about it. Almost.
Okay, as soon as you're ready.
Sorry, I just need to pull up
Okay.
the stuff that Robin and Jim's presentation.
Is Lori online yet?
Yep, they're both in.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's the new camera microphone that pick up all the microphones and record for live stream, so we're back on full no matter what, we still have that. And that also, that replaces that antiquated setup over there.
Yeah, we'll tell.
Eventually, we'll take out the mics so they're not in the way, because that has mics. So,
Yeah, we're fancy now.
yes.
Just so you know, I know what I'm doing. You guys.
Ignore my Bitmoji. This. And this. Yep, I just need to, if we're ready, I can start the live stream
Yeah,
too.
you want to let,
Well, let's-
there we go.
So she's in
Yes, so
twice.
she can be on the phone.
There we go.
Ask us for a minute. I don't know what to call it.
I'm gonna start the live stream.
Okay. Let's just share.
Maybe I'm good.
You're fine. Thank you.
Bless her. She did it.
You just go. You go. Okay. You know exactly where to. It wants to open. Not the Chromes.
Yes, she is. No,
Seriously? I'm still here with him.
I kind of asked her, I said, so weren't you the one that pushed for the in-person meeting and then?
Make sure you bring that.
Text her. I did exactly the wording I used. Legal was. Because I was planning on having more pants. Instead of shorts, I mean.
there is an adjustment.
I said something, it was false pretenses, that was the word we used. She suggested the meeting under false pretenses, like she was gonna be here.
She had no time, did she say she was gonna be here?
Like, she didn't really say that,
She just said it needs to be in person. So.
Yeah.
And all defense.
Yeah, or sitting on the, is she bobbing up and down with the boat?
I think she's on the boat.
Boy, indeed. Rachel always starts the meetings on time.
I know, all right, I already got you.
Jeez, Andy.
4 minutes late.
No, I don't have those.
I thought I did, but.
You do,
Okay, but I don't have the skills.
that's different.
It is.
I could just look at the administrative guidelines and that's it.
This is as spotting such on the top.
Maybe I should have done it from home. I'm just saying, it worked at my house.
How about you successful?
Good deal.
That's fine. I mean. we're
You don't live that
recording
far
the-
from here.
I know. Don't live that far. Takes me a whole 4 minutes to get here.
She goes a month on tank of gas.
Because I also drive the non-Prius.
You sure?
It's not a
Okay.
Prius.
How come someone, I always hear it being called Prius from,
No, that's because you choose to
oh,
call it a
that,
Prius.
I know, I heard it somewhere.
It's not a Prius. I've only filled up twice since Valentine's Day.
Jeez. So you don't care how much the price of gas is? I use gas buddy. Should we just go ahead and start?
We can, yeah,
It's
if
up
you
to
want to
you
go ahead and
guys.
start, it's fine, because it's recording the Zoom meeting,
Correct.
even no matter what right now is on the screen.
Ready to roll? Okay, we'll get this started. All right, I'd like to call to order the June 22nd, 2020 Franklin City School Board of Education regular meeting. Dr. Sandry, please call the roll.
Mr. Nipper? Present. Mr. Sizemore? Here. Ms. Raleigh? Mrs. Raleigh?
Connection look like it fosters connection.
She's zoomed in too.
Mrs. Raleigh?
Here.
Mr. Fleming?
Here.
Ms. Wolfenbarger?
Here.
All right, stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right. Everybody's got their agenda in front of us. Are there any additions or modifications?
The only modification I wanted to request was on the very last page, item 9B, instead of an action item, the resolution declaring necessity of issuing bonds would be a first read only, please.
Okay.
Item F under 7, presentation special treasurer, this is a fixed asset policy, finance committee discussed. So,
Any
Any discussion on that? Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as modified?
So moved.
Mr. Sizemore, second. Second. Mr. Nipper? Dr. Sam, call the roll.
Mr. Nipper?
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore?
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh?
yes,
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfmore?
yes,
All righty. Moving on to public comments and participation. Hearing none. Move on to item 3B, reopening of schools.
Just so you know, in your weekly update, we discussed, we've been working very, very diligently with our health department and Warren County, and then also as a cabinet on following the rules and regulations in order to reopen schools in the fall. We did do a survey of all staff, and we did a survey of the community and took those results and worked them into this plan. And we finalized this actually this morning. We made a couple, just a couple quick minor changes. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robin and Jim, who will present what we've developed so far. If we get the board's approval on this, and we have met with FEA leadership and plan to meet with OC leadership to share this with them as discussion topics. But if we get board endorsement time, we'd like to share that with the public as soon as possible. It won't be as detailed as this document is, but we do want to make sure that our community gets the information as soon as possible so that they can make appropriate plans. And the only thing we ask is they have to understand that these are the guidelines we have right now. If something changes from either the Warren County Health Department or from Columbus, we'll need to make necessary modifications. So within those parameters, this is what we have at this particular time with the rules and regulations we have. Jim, Robin?
Amy, do you want me to try it?
Whichever one you need.
Go.
There, they're both up underneath there. You can get them. Both PDFs are there.
Thank you.
All right. So you have an electronic copy of the two documents which we will be referencing. That was sent out earlier this afternoon, and then you also have a hard copy. The one is an actual just physical copy of the presentation that we will be going through tonight. You also have a physical and electronic copy of the Franklin City Schools Reset, Restart, and Reopen guiding document. This is the guiding document that we have been working on, and that will guide the presentation. So the presentation is going to follow in sequence with this longer document. So if you want more detail on some of the points we're going to talk about, you can reference this. But we're going to try to hit the highlights within the presentation. So as Dr. Sander had already indicated, this plan has been developed based on the insights of the district administration team, including all building principals, the certified and classified staff, which we solicited information from via online surveys, and also parents. In addition, this is in consultation with the 7 other school districts in Warren County, the Warren County Career Center, and the Warren County ESC, all of which have agreed to common protocols which are reflected in this wider plan. We've also consulted with the Warren County Health Department and guidance from the state of Ohio. This has included 2 drafts of the state guidance document, the first of which was 11 pages long, the second of which was 40 pages long. We are expecting the 3rd draft in the next couple of weeks. So we do say that everything presented tonight is as of tonight. Any guidance could potentially change once we get that additional state guidance. Of course, if the health department gives us additional guidance and protocols, and of course, the community impact of COVID, which could be changing, week by week. So everything is subject to change, but that's where flexibility comes in. So if I could move on to the next slide here. I apologize, my angle here is not great. All right. So this plan's guiding principles. So we came up with 5 guiding principles. We wanted a plan that, of course, protects the health and safety of students and staff. We want to make sure that we're following the guidance set out by Ohio and Warren County health authorities. We want to provide students with the familiar nature of basic school routines to promote their social, emotional, and academic learning and development. We want to make sure that the plan establishes some expectations for students, staff, and parents for any return to school, which is obviously what we're talking about. And perhaps most importantly, we need a plan that is flexible to respond to changing circumstances. And I think that we have developed a plan that is guided by all 5 of those and will be able to implement them. So if we move on to the basic framework of the plan, and of course, everything we do is around instruction. So it's important for us to have multiple models of instructional delivery. So much of the presentation is going to focus on the first, the in-person, in-building instruction, whereas the second one, the remote learning model, I'm going to touch on briefly in this section, but obviously that comes without saying this is more of an online version. But for the in-person, in-building, this is face-to-face instruction, which we fundamentally believe that for the vast majority of our students and families, face-to-face instruction, returning to that more traditional mode, is what is preferred and is critically important. Because of that, we have to take steps with hygiene, cleaning, and safety to make sure that we can deliver that and keep students as safe as possible. But of course, schools are public facilities, and we cannot eliminate all risk of exposure. So because of that, for families that may still have some concerns about COVID and the transmission of the virus, we will be offering a remote learning model. So I do want to touch on that here before we get into the crux of the in-person, in-building. So in the remote learning, a couple of things to consider. Families, of course, can opt for this, and based on the surveys that we saw, once we dug into a lot of the responses, we could expect, and I think we're seeing this throughout the county, between 5 to 10% of our families opt in for this option. But we're going to ask families that if they commit to this, that they are committing to it for at least a semester. Because we as a district have to make staffing decisions based on the number that decide to go with remote. Plus the configuration of our buildings, we have to work with an estimated number of kids, and we would not use those numbers if they decide that they're going to use remote instruction. So we are going to ask that families that choose this model commit for a semester. The remote instruction will, of course, follow district-approved curriculum and a district-approved platform for the delivery of that curriculum. It will, of course, follow state standards, but it may not follow exactly the same pacing instruction or structure as our in-building instruction, because it's going to look different. It has to be modified. And we can't mirror what we did fourth quarter. We were trying to make it work fourth quarter. But if we're delivering curriculum every day for a semester or more, we have to have something more robust that can't exactly mirror what's happening in the physical space. So it will look different. We will have dedicated Franklin City School employees implementing the remote learning. They will facilitate, they will monitor, and they will support students. So we'll
And I think it's clear to say just teachers.
Yes, yes.
I want to make sure that people
Yes.
realize.
Certified Franklin City School teachers will be facilitating, monitoring, and supporting. We're not contracting out to an outside entity.
Are these teachers different than the ones delivering the in-person model?
Great question. So this is, yeah, and so based on the projections that we are figuring, 5 to 10%, these teachers will be working exclusively with those families and students opting for the remote environment. So, but those teachers, maybe except for some rare situations, will still be working within the district, not working from home, but they'll be working exclusively with those students. Absolutely, yes.
John, I'm sure you'll probably get to this later. So the ones where we're not already one-to-one on Chromebooks and that. So who bears the brunt of that? Is that part of what you're?
No. So broadly speaking, families that opt for remote learning are going to have to take on some of increased responsibility, of course, to support their students and the ability to have access to devices and internet. Now, of course, there might be situations where the district could assist, but that model does come with increased responsibilities that in-person in building would not.
If it's a true choice, is that if that's what they choose to do, then they choose to take on that responsibility. If it's, for example, an identified student with a specific health impairment, then that becomes our burden to provide that technology and that internet service.
Sure.
So that's where we kind of look at those lines that way, whether it's a choice or whether it's a need.
And that's part of the district's responsibility to determine that at-risk student population that may really not have a choice based on health concerns.
Will they receive a standard 5 to 6 hour education like a regular school day would? Or?
So our goal is to deliver a robust instructional model. Now, Robin and I are looking at those models right now in terms of how to do that. In fact, we're going to do a presentation later this week to see what options are out there. We have not settled on a precise instructional model in terms of curriculum or platform, but we do want something robust, more robust than we were able to provide fourth quarter.
Would they receive standard letter grades instead of pass-fail?
Yes, so it would much more mirror what a true online curriculum would look like, as opposed to what we were trying to do, which is adapt, as best we could.
And you're looking at papers turned in, scored, asked for resubmission if it's not done properly.
Absolutely.
Actual assessments that would cover the standards being taught to show mastery. And so
Attendance would be based on students fulfilling of daily expectations of assignments and tasks. So we could still count them as present, but they have to be fulfilling their daily obligations as part of their curriculum.
So while we haven't settled on one yet, just to kind of wrap your head around it, it would be something similar to what currently exists in online. For example, GOVs, they have a Canvas model. Instead of having a teacher in the cloud, we would have a certified Franklin City Schools certified employee. And with House Bill 164, they've given us some latitude for the teacher certification piece. So these teachers, we figure we might need 2 of those teachers, and they would be working across grade level bands. Yes, at the elementary level.
Yes, that's a good point. How does it work at the high school model when you've got lots of classes and such?
Sure, so we are working on a schedule that would allow for staff within the high school to support that, because obviously,
certified.
right?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. So yes, teachers certified within the content areas because of obviously the specificity that it comes with licensure and coverage of that. So yes, high school is going to look a little different because of that, but obviously we're dealing with a different level of student too in terms of their ability to be a little more independent in terms of their tasks. Do also want to note that because of the staffing issue, we are asking that families who select the remote learning model or go to that choice notify the district by July 31st. So we're able then to make staffing decisions and figure out how many teachers do we need to cover these students. So that July 31st date is what we're asking families to indicate to us if they want to go. Obviously, we do not hear from them. We are then assuming that they are opting for the in-person in-building. All right, so that's the instructional models that we're looking at. Like I said, the rest of the presentation is really going to focus on the in-person in-building, and I just want to make one note here before I turn it over to Robin to talk about expectations for staff and students. But even within this in-person in-building model, we are still going to have flexibility built in. So we would anticipate, assuming trends don't change, it is quite possible we have students that are placed in quarantine or students that fall ill and therefore cannot attend school for up to 14 days. For those students, or heaven forbid, we have to close a building or the district for a short period of time, 14 days under quarantine, we would transition to not a remote, but a distance learning model in which our staff would transition what they're doing in the classroom taking what they've learned, both skills and content over the last quarter, and applying that, basically modifying what they're doing instructionally in the classroom to the distance learning model. So, we've talked a lot about teachers operating classroom management systems, having Google Classrooms and using them even within the in-person building, so staff and students are used to that. How do I access assignments even within that classroom? That way, if we ever have to transition, we have as seamless as possible transition to that distance learning model.
And for those that worry about, they asked us to be flexible with attendance. There's later on, I'm going to be bringing up a resolution asking for the board to take action on. But what will allow is, so if I'm in school up until this point, and all of a sudden I have to stay home for isolation, I may feel perfectly fine because I was exposed, I've got to be quarantined for 2 weeks. If I switch the very next day to the distance learning model, I get counted as present. So I can continue on, and it does not hurt me in those areas of attendance, because we do not want to penalize people that they don't have a choice, they have to stay home.
So when they switch to the distance learning models,
Are they going to the same teacher?
with the same teacher?
So if you had me in class and all of a sudden you're quarantined for 2 weeks, then I would still be responsible for teaching you through the distance learning model.
Yeah, we don't want students switching back and forth from in-person to remote. That's why I want to make that distinction between what I'm calling distance learning, which is that short term, versus remote learning, which is that longer semester choice.
Is there like an intent to record classroom stuff so the kids can see
And
remote?
provide
Or
tutorials. Provide tutorials so that we want to ensure that the teacher of record is actually teaching. We're not going to say, here's your assignment, mom, dad, blah, have that for 2 weeks.
Because what they're finding, and you can imagine there's tons of research right now going on about distance learning because everyone's having to do it. But really an effective model is having students be involved in instruction, but then teachers actually doing live check-ins, live tutoring, where they can really focus with that student on where they are, as opposed to trying to do a live lesson with 30 kids remote through Zoom. So there's a lot of models out there, but yes, they would be instructed by their actual classroom teacher.
Lori and Rachel are both picking you up great. They're not hearing when we talk, so.
So just repeat the question.
No, but maybe we can move on over around. Yeah, you can move on over. We can still maintain some distancing. They can't hear us.
Actually, if you want to turn and face the same direction, that minimizes your exposure. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, we could hear Jim really well. And then some of the other, you guys would kind of go in and out.
Did you hear Robin when she was speaking?
No, she was one that was a little bit harder to hear. I think if she was maybe a little bit louder, that might be better. And I just want to make sure, Jim, I understand. So distance learning is going to be taught by the teacher. Remote learning is going to be one where you're thinking maybe we need 2 staff to handle those 5 to 10%.
That's correct. The distance learning is that short term, if a student is under quarantine or ill, that the classroom teacher, for consistency's sake, would be the one providing that instruction. Whereas the remote, as you stated there, dedicated staff members to support those families that choose that for at least a semester.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding and following. Thank you.
Absolutely.
With all this technology, is your team ready to handle the onslaught that's going to come your way?
Yes. Yes.
I like that.
Like
I did turn the mic up, so she should.
I wasn't sure if it was partially with the air conditioner or just distance, but
Yeah.
I just want them to be able to hear.
This is all the way down, so.
And just to clarify what Mrs. Whipplemacher had just said, moving forward, remote learning would be considered a minimum of a semester. Distance learning would be something temporary, okay? And we want to be able to move if we have to be shut down or we want to be able to move to that temporary distance learning within 48 hours for more seamless instruction. So I'll have the next 3 slides. If you want to follow more detail, you'll find much more detail beginning at the bottom of page 3 in regards to this slide. In regards to general staff expectations, we are planning on coming back as the board approved calendar. Teachers would come back August the 13th, unless that there is something where they are medically fragile themselves and they are going to have to, we'll work that out individual staff basis. But we are expecting them to come back. We are expecting them to, just like with students, I might be kind of getting ahead a little bit, we're going to expect them to go ahead and do their self-check, self-report prior to coming to work. That means taking their temperature and making sure that they're fit to report to duty. Once they come into the building, we are expecting them to wear their face coverings where it's feasible. Where we're at as of today, that the Warren County Health Department has stated that masks are recommended if you are closer than 6 feet. With the 6 feet distance, then you have much more flexibility. Masks, we're going to be using the term recommended as we move forward in this document, following Warren County Health Department's verbiage on that. All staff will have been issued from, or will, they have been ordered and they're in. Each staff member will be receiving 3 what we'll call masks and 3 what I'll call face coverings, which would be a clear shield. We felt that was important. Going on, just like with students, there'll be an emphasis on washing their hands. There'll be an emphasis on sanitizing. There'll be an emphasis on, as your cohorts of kids, I mean, staff may move, when a cohort changes, we have to make sure that we have a little bit more sanitation processes and protocols. And everybody, we're all in this. We're not going to be waiting for a custodian. We're all, as you read through the specificities of the document, we all will be assisting with maintaining the cleanliness. And then again, following specific health and safety protocols as they are communicated. And moving into next year, where we are today, we do plan on Lauren Turner, our school nurse, speaking to our full staff on August the 13th and welcome back. And we are currently in the process of booking the Warren County Health Department to spend some time with our staff prior to students entering so they can give us the most immediate and information. Thank you. The student expectations are just like the teachers. This may be, again, a little bit premature, but some of the things that we talked about, and you'll see it more specificities in the document. In transportation, you'll see that students, if they're going to be on the bus, they must wear a mask on the bus. And Mr. McFarland will be speaking to that in just a little bit. So kind of entering the student's day, they'll enter the building. You can expect those students, if they're coming off of the bus, to have those face masks on. Students that have walked, and if they are within 6 feet of the students, you'll find them, social distancing, wearing face masks as recommended, and then reporting to their classrooms from there. At which time, sanitation, hygiene, all those things that is applicable to the staff would be applicable to students.
And I do want to make one clear distinction here. When it comes to the students, we recommend. When it comes to the staff within 6 feet, we are required. So if I'm up front in my classroom and I'm teaching and I'm further away than 6 feet, I'm not required to wear a mask because I've got that social distancing. But once I go in and using good teaching techniques, walk around the class, check on their progress with both their guided and their independent learning, then the teacher needs to put on some sort of either the face shield or the face mask to interact with their students.
We also talked about, while maybe not required, it may be recommended for the same kind of purpose. We may ask the teachers, or the teachers may choose to tape off within 6 feet of their desk. So when that student enters that area, that's just a warning that students, the mask is recommended, teacher, it is required. They're taking a break from that. Safety protocols on a daily attendance. So we're responsible again for self-screening. Also the students are going to be, parents are going to be responsible for self-screening. And if students have a temperature above 100 degrees, and that is the guideline set by the Warren County Health Department, then that student is going to have to remain home. So they will be in quarantine and will participate at a distance. That's a temporary digital learning platform, and responsible for everything until that they have been deemed well enough to report to school.
The student shows up or ends up having a fever during the day. It could be a common cold,
Yes,
could be COVID.
right.
The Warren County, in the document you have in your hand, Warren County has 3 situations. And first of all, you'll see there is a well clinic and an ill clinic. Okay? The ill clinic is where if you may have COVID, we don't know. Your well is like you're dealing with somebody's got to take their meds, and they're diabetic and needs surgery, etc. So basically, there's 3 situations that the health department has said. If you have a fever and no other symptoms, then you must stay home until you have 24 hours without a fever before you can return to school. If you have a fever, once again, it's actually 100.4 or higher, and other symptoms of COVID but were never tested, then you must be home 48 hours without a fever before you can return. The 3rd situation is if you actually have COVID, then you must be symptom-free, including the fever-free, for 72 hours. Then you'll be able to return back. And that is for students and staff.
And that's in detail later on in the packet. Okay. I believe that takes care of slides 5, 6, and 7.
Right. So for transportation, so Franklin City Schools is following a similar protocol to the other districts that we will allow 2 students per seat on buses, and in some instances allowing 3 students for our youngest students. Face covering, so this is the exception that Dr. Sanders did reference about how for students it's recommended, staff it's required, except on buses. So because of it's, you guys have, you look at the different models of trying to do social distancing on a bus, really to do it correctly, you'd have 7 kids on the bus. It's just not feasible economically and logistically. So because of the closer proximity, face coverings are required for drivers and for students. Obviously, if there's an aide on the bus, it would apply to them too. So those face coverings are required, and the district may refuse to transport a student who refuses to wear a mask. This, of course, would not excuse the student from attending school. It would just put more responsibility on the parents if the student's refusing to wear a mask to transport. Buses, just as a procedure, will load from back to front. So the first student on the bus would go to the back seat. They would follow assigned seats, of course, and the bus would empty in reverse order from the front to the back, all in an effort to minimize exposure of individuals on the bus. And Rodney?
We will also try to seat siblings together. Those from the same household.
Obviously, transportation is one of the trickiest because it's just practically impossible to really do the true social distancing with 6 feet.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The State Highway Patrol has also came out and said that the medical face shields that we're going to give teachers some of those are not approved for bus drivers. So our bus drivers will only receive masks from the district. If you've ever had a medical face shield on, it can distort your vision a little bit. So we will not be giving those to our bus drivers. So in case you hear or have a question about that, they will be masks.
And I mean, in reverse of that, like that's where the face shield, we've changed a lot of our language from masks to coverings. There are certain, like I'm thinking of the SLP, speech language pathologist. I can't do my job with my mask on my face. I need something covering my face, but I need something clear so the students can actually see what I'm doing. So on the food service, so all district buildings will continue to offer food service, breakfast and lunch. Logistics will be determined by each building in compliance with the health department, following certain guidelines. Operating at 50% capacity or occupancy within the cafeterias, which means we have to start looking for alternative locations. Like take the high school, for example. We'd have to operate 6 lunches. We'd have to start serving lunch at 8:30. I mean, so we got to look for increase the area that we can accommodate. So the back gym, for example, is a possible location to expand. the junior high, looking at parts of the gym there too. So looking at alternative locations, but obviously that's building specific based on the needs of the building and the size.
And this is one, for example, this is based on what restaurants are allowed to do. So if restaurants ever move up to the next level with 75% capacity, then we'll be able to follow that and move to 75% capacity.
Oh, there'd be no self-service. So like at the high school you walk through, there's a salad bar. You can't do that in restaurants. You can't do that in the cafeteria. So using the grab and go configuration, prioritizing that structure is important. Face coverings are required to be worn in the food service line. Obviously not when we're eating. Once again, that impossibility factor there. And assigned seatings may be utilized and maximize distancing as much as possible within those common areas. So just, you know, not allowing students to sit side by side, for example. You picture the round table at the high school, so we're gonna have to alternate.
When you look at the benches at the elementaries, you put a dot where they can sit, and as long as they're, and you can stagger them on one side of the bench, every other seat, and then stagger on the other side.
The good aspect about that is the model or the procedure for the planning of the menus and the preparation and the packaging. We've had a lot of practice in that already with the deliveries and stuff that we were able to do during the shutdown. So we feel confident about that.
Are you buying this up prepackaged, or are you?
Breakfasts, we started doing that during the shutdown, and they just come in a bag, and it's got, you know, a couple things in it that it's already, you know, prepackaged. We're trying to do that with as much as possible we can. The downside is kids may lose some selections. We may have a lunch in a bag already for them that is predetermined what's in it. That's,
You know, in breakfast, for example, we talked about the possibility that students will be eating breakfast in classrooms, even at the high school level, so they can pick up and move on so they're not in the cafeteria. Just trying to maximize what we can do. So classrooms, just some things to consider there. Classrooms will have to be reconfigured to maximize distancing. Once again, a lot of our classrooms, having 6 feet may not be possible without, once again, having 10 kids in a classroom, not really feasible, but we'll maximize as much as we can with the intent of having that social distancing. Students assigned to seats in classes, I think in a lot of classes that's standard protocol anyway, but sort of reinforcing that point. All classrooms, of course, will have hand sanitizer provided by the district. Students recommended to wear face coverings, if within 6 feet of peers or staff. Teachers, staff required to wear face coverings if within that 6 feet. We will limit or eliminate shared supplies. So I'm thinking of the preschool classrooms. A lot of shared supplies. So totally restructuring that, having set boxes for specific students, and that's what they will use. And we will also limit or eliminate excess furniture. So if you walk into classrooms throughout the district, you know, trying to build a good climate and culture within their buildings, teachers are trying to add, or they are adding furniture just to add a different environment, but they're going to be limited in that ability. So they're going to have to limit that because we need to maximize space. And obviously furniture takes up space. So we will be working on that. K3 desk shields, you know, honestly, I think when we're talking about reopening and talking about face coverings, I think all of our minds went right to our youngest students. The image of trying to keep face masks on our youngest is just very, very, very difficult. So, right, yeah. So what do we do? So these desk shields will be placed in the rooms that will allow students not to be wearing masks, but still have an element of protection and separation. And then throughout the district, of course, student seating will be turned in the same direction. That's protocol. That's suggested by the health department. So following that guideline.
And if I could just interject back into food service, by having the K3 classes with desk shields, that also maximizes the possibility of having lunch in those classrooms, and thus relating that down to 50% in the elementary and kindergarten. So by nature, that would do that in a 1-6 building.
So can I ask a question just real quick? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I want to make sure. So I thought you said something about wearing masks or face coverings in the food line, but then, is that what you said? I just want to make sure
Yes, as you go through the actual line, where face coverings, just through the line.
And that's district-wide, right? Every. Okay,
Yes.
okay. And then, so do we know yet or not if we're gonna do it in the classroom or how that's gonna, like where people are gonna go, cafeteria versus classroom?
In the classroom, the teachers will be required to have a mask. Teachers will be required.
Oh, no.
to-
They should check it out, I think.
Yes.
I mean,
But-
like eating
Yeah.
lunch.
Within the 6 feet, students are recommended to have the mask within the 6 feet.
Right.
That's like eating, like.
Oh, eating. with the-
Will students be eating in their classrooms?
It's a possibility in the K-3 world, and that's where we're gonna utilize the fact that we've got those desk shields in place.
Yeah.
That would also, the student would be reporting back to their desk with that shield in place, and that would protect them from their neighbors. And then that would also help us with the Warren County Health Department guidelines of 50%, because then we don't have to theoretically increase our lunch times by such that we wind up losing our bus drivers because we've increased lunch schedules so much that we lose our servers that are also bus drivers.
Okay, great. Yeah, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
The next point is visitors. So there are different levels of school visitors. And as a district, we will make determinations and decisions in each situation. But broadly speaking, visitors are generally discouraged from attending locations. If you looked at the surveys, I think what we saw there was that was a strong, like parents specifically saying, we don't want visitors coming into buildings. So, you know, there are situations where parents especially need to come into buildings. So there are different levels of visitors, but by and large, if we can discourage or limit the amount of people coming into the building, the better. Safety protocols such as taking temperatures will be implemented for all visitors coming into the building. We will eliminate waiting areas, and we will be asking that when visitors come to the building, they call the office to alert the office that they are there to help facilitate coming into the building. I will say what's been really, if there's a positive that's come out of the closure, is we've become really good at holding meetings virtually. I speak especially in special education. I mean, we held hundreds of meetings via Zoom. And many of our parents actually, I won't say preferred, but they were okay with it. Because instead of taking off an hour and a half from work, they only lost half an hour because they could jump on the meeting, participate. We can sign electronically via Zoom. So we have many parents that are used to that, and we are continuing those subscriptions so our staff will be able to use that. I'm not saying we won't have face-to-face meetings for IEPs if parents request it, but I will say that is a positive that's come out of this, is we have discovered that as a possibility.
Doesn't matter, but.
So for field trips and assemblies, so indoor activities and events that bring multiple classrooms or grade levels together, we will be eliminating those, at least under the current structure that we are operating under with the health department. So no field trips and no physical assemblies to be held at this time, trying to minimize the amount of exposure that any individual has with other people. So trying to keep kids in their cohorts without having excess contact.
Like handle like at the elementary level specials and things like that for visit. I guess that applies to the junior high and high school level. Is that going to look different as well? What we do there?
It will look somewhat different, but as you know, as of today, we have been allowed to start contact sports.
No, that's true.
You know, practicing. But yes.
Yeah.
But you know, if school started tomorrow, you know, we would utilize the fact that we could go outside as much as possible and then increase the distance. Less contact or, you know, with that, and less materials, so to speak, that they would be in contact with.
There are special considerations, for example, choir. So, I mean, actually, if you look at the social distancing guidelines for singing, it's 35 feet because of the projection. So that's a whole different situation about, well, we have to, at the high school level, we have to keep masks on. We'll have to look at those requirements, and is there alternate spaces outside? Maybe in the gym, I don't know, we'll have to look at to space kids out more maybe, but those are some unique situations, I think. The last one here is health protocols. So Dr. Sanders already mentioned the establishment of a well clinic and an ill clinic. So well clinic is that typical nurse's office that operates medication, distributes medication. A student suffers an injury, the typical nurse's office. The ill clinic is where a student who is showing symptoms of COVID would be placed. And there are established protocols. These are fleshed out in that longer document by the health department, exactly what we would follow in terms of what we would do. But essentially, if a kid is showing symptoms, they're going to have to leave. So someone's going to have to come and take them.
Will there be an attempt to do like contact tracing stuff through the classrooms and stuff like that?
So the contact tracing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the health department will take that on.
Okay, correct.
They'll be in communication with us to know what classroom, but they're the ones who will be doing the tracing.
And so if someone gets COVID, they will write the letter that we will give out to that specific class and the letter that goes to that specific school. Then they come in, they are in charge of the contact tracing and chasing down and notifying those individuals about they may need to self-quarantine for a period of time. And that's one of those situations like we talked about, if they do have to, they go right to that blended learning model, so they don't miss any school, they can stay home and be taught by the regular teacher. So that's how it is. But at that particular time, that's when the health department comes and takes over.
And that's why assigned seating is so important. Because with assigned seating on our transportation in the classroom, while Mrs. Denise's class may get a letter that, but then there might be a phone call that needs to take place to parents who have children that sat in North South.
And individual interviews, for example, they talked about, this is the thing, this is why we didn't really talk about hall pacing because you're not in the room. By definition of the health department, exposure is 15 minutes within 6 feet without a face cover. So what could happen is if this is our class here and I got the virus and Mr. Sizemore and Mr. Nipper were wearing a mask, but nobody else was, you all may have to quarantine, but because they're wearing a face mask, a shield of some sort of covering, they don't have to be quarantined. They can come right back the next day. So all that stuff is part of what the health department works out. That's how specific we have gotten in our discussions that they will determine, okay, you were exposed to me for 15 minutes without a face covering within 6 feet, you got self-quarantine.
Gotcha.
We're also using that idea to make sure that our littles get out and get some fresh air. If they have 10-minute recess, they still get out, they get to move and be outdoors because we know that they need movement with home.
So we will follow the very specific health department guidelines when it comes to symptoms, confirmed cases, and return. So a student that comes back to school after a confirmed case has to be transported by the parent. They cannot ride school transportation on their return, and they have to be checked by the school nurse before they actually physically come back into the educational environment with their peers. So there are clear protocols for all of that. Hopefully, in the best situation, we won't have a lot of those confirmed cases, but those protocols are in place in case.
Are there any liabilities that are placed on the school district to get this right?
No, they're, because we did check with the attorneys and we're trying to have harmless on that. And the main thing we need to make sure is that we follow through with our protocol and we stay in compliance with the long path. Those are our two biggies.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions that's come to mind throughout this? I'm sure that as it kind of settles, you'll probably have more. So reach out anytime. But do you have anything right now, initially?
I appreciate how well you guys have thought through everything so far. I mean, it's complicated. We're dealing with it at our work. I'm sure everyone else is too. So we're all hypersensitive to it. But you guys have thought through a lot. So I appreciate you guys working this out. It's not easy.
As working for an essential business, we've been doing this for the past 3 months. So it sounds like I can't really think of anything on top of my head that we haven't already talked about here that we've been doing ourselves.
I'm just glad the district's making a commitment to try to make it work coming back face to face, because I just fundamentally believe that is what the the preferred and more effective model for the vast majority of our students is. So I think it's a.
If I could just
It's
pause
great.
for a moment, just to make sure. So Mrs. Wolfenbarger, Mrs. Raleigh, did you have any questions?
I had a quick question. I just wanted, and I want to thank you guys too, because I know this is not an easy task at all, and it's very thorough, very well thought out. One of the questions I have is, like, for our schools where we're utilizing kind of right now every inch, of the facility, stages, things like that. Do you think, just kind of on your, as you've been working through this, are we going to be able to make it work in those schools as far as, the classroom, social distancing and stuff like that? Like, how are we going to squeeze more space out of those schools where we're kind of tight already?
Well, again, just to answer, we're hoping that there will be a lot of furniture that'll go home. That's not owned by the district. That's one thing. A lot of, I'll just say stuff, not just furniture, but a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then again, with the dust shields in K3, that should help us there, and also being able to space the desks out. We are determined to maximize every inch that we have. But honestly, from my perspective, I think there's going to be, if we do have, I want 100% of the students come back to Franklin City Schools.
Mm-hmm.
However, if we have 5 to 10% that's going to either elect or may have to stay home, that is going to assist in that space.
Right. Okay, good. And what about use of like the gym, like the gyms in K through 6? Is that something?
We can't do a lot of that because of serving food in that same space.
Right.
Yeah, and then, when weather is inclement, that becomes a classroom, for other classes. So that is not as feasible as it is in the junior high and the high school, where the junior high can use the gym, drop down the divider, and where we're looking at the back gym. We've also went as far as, we know we've got probably enough folding chairs, but I can also give you a rough estimate of how much a 60-inch round table costs at Sam's right now. So we've looked at, and would it be better to purchase or rent? So, at the 7-12 level, we've got our head wrapped around it a little bit, because it's just bigger buildings. I'll just put it that way.
And also, Ms. Warburger, not to be nasty, but our obligation is to the education of our students and keeping our buildings clean and safe. So I would say, renting our buildings, our facilities out to outside groups is a definite no.
Okay.
Our obligation is to our students and their well-being. We'll still have extracurriculars like we always have. To elementaries, we've got our basketball leagues. We'll still maintain those because those are with our kids. But if there's an AAU group that wants to come in and use our gym, we're going to have to say no, because we need to make sure that our facilities are in great shape for our students for education and our extracurricular activities.
Right.
And also, we do have our latest numbers in K through 12, and I'm pretty optimistic, Mrs. Wolfenbacher, because our class sizes are obviously, they fluctuate, but the worst case scenario is just a little over, like 24-ish. And I think that's pretty doable.
Yeah, good, okay.
Has there been any discussion yet about spectators for fall sports or anything like that?
Not just yet. We're waiting for guidance on
Just hasn't come out yet?
It has not come out. And I really don't anticipate that coming out till closer to 1st of August. But obviously we'll have to follow what they say, but I think the intent is that there will be spectators for fall sports.
For the students who are doing the virtual, are they required to be on every day and attendance taken every day?
Yes. Because in order for them to be counted as present, they have to be engaged every day. And that's why we want a remote learning model that is robust enough that facilitates something different than what we were able to do fourth quarter. So yes.
Right. But we could also run into a problem with athletes.
Well, they would still, of course, eligibility would of course be maintained, but yes, in order to be eligible, they have to attend school, and so they would have to fulfill their daily obligations. Absolutely.
Which is why we need dedicated teachers to be able to do that. We're going to have to shift some loads.
So I'm not sure I caught the answer. Chris asked a question way early about one-to-one for remote learners. Is the district going to provide them a device, or is the expectation that
If you choose to take online courses remotely, then you're choosing to provide the internet and the computer yourself.
okay,
If it's a situation you must for health reasons, you're medically fragile, then we'll work with that student to make sure they have everything they can be successful. So it's kind of a choice. And when you look at that, think about this from the standpoint of like a teaching staff. If a staff member is forced to stay home under quarantine, 14 days, I don't believe we penalize them by taking sick days from them, because we're telling them, you possibly might be exposed, you stay at home and do what you need to do to prepare your classes. You still, prepare and give us a subway. If you're sick and you choose to go, and you have to go home, then that's a sick day. So that's what I'm looking at, whether you choose to do distance learning or whether you must do distance learning. It's kind of two different scenarios.
And the same holds true for our students.
Now I saw, like, I don't know, it was on social media or on the newspaper, in the newspaper, or something along those lines about some schools were doing, and I'm probably gonna get this wrong, but Ohio Virtual Academy or something like that for remote learners. Is that something we looked at? And
That's our meeting this week with
Oh,
VLA,
Yes.
Mr. McFarland and I.
And that's one of the most robust, because actually, if they're not actively engaged, Ms. Wahlberger, it logs them off. So I can't just be on the computer and you think I'm working. It knows the keystrokes and what's going on with all that. And if you're off for a little bit of time with inactivity, it logs you off, so it doesn't count as being present. But it also has one of the most robust curriculums as well, in order to help them earn the credit and perform and be able to master the essential skills to get that credit.
I do think, though, that offering that remote learning model is important for us as a district, so families don't opt to go to an online charter school where they don't feel like they have to make that choice, that they can still stay within Franklin City Schools and be, served by our staff, because we don't want to lose a connection to those families. So
yeah, let's be honest. I mean, I feel it's our obligation to meet the needs of our students. And if that's what it takes to do that, to meet the needs, then that's what we need to do.
Well, I agree. I don't think, given what's going on, it's unprecedented. There are people that I'm sure, there's tons of people that want to send their kids, but there's also, quite a few that are also nervous about this. They may have risks at home and things like that. So I totally agree. We need to have that option available.
I do think it's important to insert now, though, with the Virtual Learning Academy, that would come at additional cost that we have yet to know what that is.
Right.
Because we've already entered into our contract with our vendor that we have for credit recovery and things. So, we've got hard numbers.
And credit recovery is different from learning the curriculum for
Absolutely.
the first time. So that's why we have to look at two
Right.
different platforms for that.
And the VLA model does go down to kindergarten, which what we currently have only goes down to grade 5 and 6 to offer like health. So it doesn't even offer grades 5 and 6 curriculum, so VLA does. But again, that's going to come an additional cost to the district based on the number of students that would opt for that.
Okay.
That's why we don't want to get into hardware for those people that are just choosing it, because we'll have to foot the bill for the curriculum.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions?
Not for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Sander, were you looking for action on the plan this evening?
I was, if we could get we don't actually have to have a vote, but as long as we get your endorsement to go ahead and advertise this plan, it won't be the PowerPoint presentation yet, but it will be the information in the format that, for parents and community to understand how we can come back to school. So as long as it's okay, I don't need a formal vote, but if we get everybody's approval, we just go ahead and do it and share it with our community.
I'm fine with that.
Laura, you good?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yes.
I think as we've all seen, the flexibility may go either way. It could go from 50 to 25, could go 50 to 75 just as easily, so either way, so, this is what the rules we've got right now, and we'll deal with that
And as
when
we-
it changes.
And as we would update that on our website and so forth with Margaret to make sure this is, this is the part that's been updated. We don't expect to read the whole thing over, so when there's an update, we would highlight what has changed, and so the community can find it very quickly.
I think that's what's good about the model you guys have developed, because it allows you to pivot either direction reasonably quickly, so minimize disruption.
And I just want to thank everybody, Jim, Rodney, Robin, and Robin have been fantastic throughout this whole process. We spent a lot of time to work very, very hard, and I want to acknowledge their effort on that. I really appreciate it.
All righty. So we're going to move on to item 4A, school district blended learning.
Yes, this is a follow-up from the presentation. In order to be able to offer that blended learning model, there is a form that the school district, it's called the School District Blended Learning Declaration Form. And I am going to ask for action on this if that's okay. Traditionally, we have a first reading, but this came out very, very recently. And I would like to be able to get this submitted into ODEs. So what that allows us to do is be able to do what we did the fourth quarter, is if a student's home working online, then we get to count them present just as if they were in the building in their chair. So if you have any questions on that, but that will set us up for the blended learning model and getting full funding, which you hate to say that's a big part of it. That's a big part of it, when they're doing that. And it also enables us to then count students present with what we talked about with our attendance policies and accessibility. And the last thing I want to do is make somebody feel like they got to send their child to school when they may be ill. I don't want to do that. Take the pressure off parents.
And I believe it did say that if we go back away from that, we have to refile the form to stop doing blended learning as well, right? Just to close that.
Correct.
Okay. Any more discussion? Rachel, Lori?
Nope, and I'll make the motion that we approve that.
Okay.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Rachel and Lori?
Mr. Nipper?
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore?
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfmark?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next is a first read. This is the MOU. This is an MOU with the City of Franklin. This is to have a school resource officer. We've had this contract with us. There's no change in the contract language. There's no change in the cost from last year. If you have any questions on that, I'll be glad to answer.
It's been working well.
And we will still be assigned Amanda Myers as our school resource officer.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
On the 27th?
Bring that back next month.
Okay, next, I would like to, under recommendations, ask for consent agenda for items 5A through D. All of these items were discussed at the board work session back on June the 8th. It includes the master contract for the Warren County ESC with both Franklin City Schools and with Bishop Fenwick, the 2021 sixth grade camp dates, the changes that Mr. Winovich brought to us for the high school student handbook, the change of date for the Franklin High School band trip up to from May to February.
Any discussion? Rachel, Lori?
No.
Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Nipper, second.
Second.
Mr. Sizemore. Call roll.
Mr. Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Wolfenbarg.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next is an action item. Item 6A is new. That is the recommendation that the board approve the resignation of Rick Isaacs, assistant to the treasurer, effective 7/31/2020. As you can see, that's the purpose to officially retire at that particular time. He retired about 4.5 years ago. It was on a retire contract and is choosing to go ahead and retire at this particular time.
Any discussion?
So moved.
Lori,
I'll make the motion.
has a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Element.
Second?
Second.
Mr. Nipper? Dr. Sanders, call the roll.
Mr. Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger.
Yes.
Okay, next would be consent agenda items 6B through E. Once again, all of these were brought forward and discussed at the board work session on June the 8th. One is the summer school recommendation, which would be hiring Brad Childers for the limited period of time to fill in. The certified supplemental of Katie Kinzer, science chair this past year. The ESY instructor stipend for Mary Evans. And the certified new hire that we had first reads on last month, and that would be Erica Bell, Aaron Janico, Cassandra Smith.
Thank you, Dr. Stanger. Any discussion? Rachel, Lori?
No.
Chair on entertain a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Sizemore, second.
Second.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger. Dr. Sanders, call the roll.
Mr. Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger. Okay. Next, we have a first read, and as I put in my update, I am asking if it would be possible, since we do not have a work session in July, for possible action. This would be to fill the 3 positions at the junior high, which would be the junior high music teacher, junior high guidance counselor, and the junior high 7th, 8th grade ELA teaching position.
Okay, any discussion? Everybody good, we'll go ahead and press it. Chair, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Mrs. Raleigh, second.
Second.
Mr. Sizemore, Dr. Sanders, call the roll.
Mr. Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The next items are first reads. And basically, G, H, and I are the same topic. They are certified and non-certified supplementals. We have a plethora of individuals under G to fill the different positions. Under H, I have the same idea, but I pulled out Megan Stacy and Ryan Stacy. And item I may need some discussion. I pulled out a little bit of a shady character. That would be Mr. Nipper as a volunteer football coach. And if this is simply a first read in case there's any questions on any of those.
Any discussion?
No.
So we don't need any action on them.
No.
No practice will start till August, so we can do that in the July meeting.
Correct.
Good, bring it back. Thank you, Dr. Sander.
Thank you all very much.
Rob? Treasurer portion?
I'd rather be out there. It was lovely. We have,
Wait a minute. Can you all hear Mr. Giuffre? Okay.
Well, you didn't let him talk yet, Mike.
That's pretty good.
So, I have multiple items that I would like to ask for consent, which is donations. Well, it's A, B, D, E, and F. They actually have multi-consent, just A, B, D, and E. So A is donations. We have 125, a donation worth $125 for face masks from area athletics. And a donation of estimated $500 from Lynn Darg and Carla Smith. Item B is financial reports, the spending plan, investment earnings, financial report, reconciliation check register, as well as the minutes from the May 18th regular session and the June 8th work session. I have the finance. Final appropriations for fiscal year 2020 And then temporary appropriations at 50% of this year's expenditures for all funds except for grants. And grants can be appropriated based upon what they're approved to be. So I'd like to ask for consent on those 4 items, please.
Okay. Any discussion? Lori, Rachel?
No. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, Mrs. Raleigh and Mrs. Wolfenbarger for consent on A, B, D, and E. Dr. Sanders, call the roll.
Mr. Nipper,
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore,
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh,
Yes.
Mr. Fleming,
Yes.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Item C is a consulting contract. So as you probably heard, and especially if you're on Finance Committee, we have quite a challenge ahead of us this year, given the staff turnover, but also given the new software applications that we are endeavoring to use for digital workflows, as well as a new accounting system. So this retired treasurer happens to work with the state software development team as a trainer for the redesigned software. And I also would like her to oversee the implementation of what's called SC View, which is the workflow application, which works very well with the redesign. So it will be more seamless for our end users. I'm anticipating 1,000 hours. She said she'd go up to 1,200 hours, but her expertise in this is vital because districts that have waited to go on to redesign at the last minute are numerous. And that means that the support that we've received from our folks at SWOCA, as always, would be excellent, but probably not, it probably diluted to the point to where we would need additional support. So since this is something so new in such a short period of time, I wish I had 18 more months to implement, but we really don't. And in order to be able to put this together, I have for later on in executive session, our strategic plan that I shared with the Finance Committee, so you can see that this is part of a bigger picture, and her support is vital. And so I'd like to ask the board if they would consider approving this contract for Rhonda Zimmerly. Any questions?
Just comment that Mrs. Raleigh and I, as chairs of the Finance Committee, that we went through some of this in our meeting last week, and a big part of our drive for efficiency, for just streamlining some of the things that sometimes take multiple things to get printed, might even take days, to make it minutes as far as issuing POs, the way we handle things, and just overall we want that office to try to be more efficient, and Mr. Jeffrey is step one of that, or one of the first few steps.
So you said, it looks like in this agreement that's $55 an hour. Is there a cap on the costs? So 55?
No, the cap is that she's retired and doesn't want to work more than 1,000 hours.
Okay.
And I'm anticipating these projects that the first one will probably be about a 400-hour project, and the second one will be approximately 600 hours, hopefully. That's our goal. Having been in the chair, having been a treasurer, what I'm looking for from her is a total focus on the project. So I can go off and do things like the bond issue, and that we don't drop the ball, the plates keep spinning, and everybody involved is given the support that they need. In a process that has multiple parts to it. I'll just give you one example. Requesting a purchase order. Right now is a paper requisition that goes in the pony, and purchase orders are cut 4 or 5 times a month. An easy fix to that, starting in July, we're going to issue purchase orders every morning if you've got your rec in the night before, and eliminate the paper on the requisitions. In doing so, you have to be careful, because how you pay that bill may depend upon which colored copy of the purchase order. And right now they're being mailed out from this office. If they're sent out to the buildings and they don't have a mail machine, then we've got to address that. So the different things that need to be taken into consideration before you change one thing that can impact a lot of end users is really what I'm hoping, expecting, and relying upon this consultant for in the process change management.
and the importance of clean.
Okay, I'd like to say, my voice is almost gone, so I'm sorry, but at the Career Center, as Mr. Sizemore said, efficiency, but at the Career Center, I have experienced online purchase orders, requisitions, and it really works great. It is much more efficient. It speeds up the process. It actually also helps with your audit process because, I mean, there's less handling internally. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Internal controls.
our treasurer's office at this time is the only office that isn't up to par or ahead of par in all of the departments that we have. I mean, our technology department is heads and toes above any other technology department in the whole Warren County area. You know, our admin staff, but the treasurer, I mean, the system they're using now is antiquated. And I think it would only help us in the future if we do move forward and let Rob push that office into the 21st century as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more discussion? Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Sizemore, second.
Second.
Mr. Nipper, Dr. Sander, call the roll.
Mr. Nipper?
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore?
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
This is the added item to the amended agenda. I apologize, I had it ready, but this is the first time I've uploaded something in the board docs in 15 years. So the policy is the inventory policy. And if you look at it, it's really pretty plain what I'm trying to do here. And that is, I'm asking for this policy to be implemented with a retroactive treatment to June 30th of 2019, so that we can restate our financials with a $5,000 threshold for fixed assets as opposed to $100. That way we can find everything that we have, because if we can't, completeness and existence in the audit does not exist, and we could end up with a material misstatement. So increasing the fixed asset threshold to $5,000, and also with the understanding that there's an insurance inventory that is completely separate from this. There's a technology inventory completely separate from this. This is a financial statement number, and I will just share with you, at Forest Hills, they had a very similar number, and it was, for them, I haven't checked ours, but it was 34,000 assets. When we upped it to, I think it was 10,000 there, we had 510 assets. I can find 510 of anything, but 34,000 is a little tougher. So this is just to protect the district from ourselves by having a policy that represents how we're reporting, and it is required to have a board-approved policy in order to be able to use that benchmark in your financials. I would call it housekeeping.
And this does bring it up comparable to other districts in Warren County as well.
Right. I checked Springboro, Kings, they have a $5,000 limit, because I would have made it 10 if anybody else had it up there, but Mason probably does, but we're not a Mason. So it's reasonable.
Okay. Any discussion? Chair will entertain a motion.
But it's a policy, so
It's a
we
policy.
need, this is a first read, I would bring it back for second read and action on the 27th,
Okay.
if that's okay.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gouffre. New business of the board, 9A.
Very important item. This is a resolution to proceed in county auditor certificate. This is the first of the two major steps when it comes to our bond levy to go on the ballot in November of 2020. This was discussed last time. Rob, I don't know if there's anything you want to expound on that.
I did get a reply from Matt Nolan he recommended going to Mom's in Town, but he does, this last cycle of levies was tough for his office. He said primarily because of the Mason levy, but he is very open to listening to how we're going to talk to our public, so that when he gets calls, and he will get calls, he knows what's been said, and so that he's not contradicting what we're saying. So the levy millage should be 6.51. the statutory calculation, first year, last year, divided in two, and then divided by the assessed valuation. That's how they come up with it. We're saying that we're going to structure this so that we don't exceed 5. And so when people call and say, which number is it? Is it 5 or 6.51? He needs to be prepared to be able to address that on our behalf and for his behalf. So I'm going to have that conversation with him when I get his certification and try to keep him updated as we go through the process.
And this goes exactly along with what the Finance Committee discussed and brought to the board on the 8th.
So when the voters go to the ballots, they'll see the 6.5 or they'll not see?
They will see the 6.5.
Okay.
But the way we would be structuring the bonds is we anticipate a 4.94.
So what they will actually feel is going to be the 4.94. That's just the language on the ballot will be like.
And because that is standard on how you must do a bond. And that's why it's so important that when our message comes out, it says 4.94, but on the ballot, you're seeing 6.51, that Mr. Nolan was able to support us and say, yes, I understand this is language, this is what's going to be done.
And I would say between now and the time we file next month, it gives us an opportunity to start working on our messaging so that we all have the same sound bites in the elevator.
Take action on each one individually, or will we?
Well, these
would come back next time.
This was, A needs to be an action, B will be the first read.
Okay.
So I would request that the board take action on 9A.
So moved.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger? Second?
I'll second.
Mr. Sizemore? Dr. Sander, call a roll.
Mr. Nipper?
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore?
Yes.
Mrs. Raleigh?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. 6B.
Mr. Dufresne, you want to?
So 6B, this is the shell of the resolution that will be tooled by our bond counsel. Once the numbers come back from the county auditor with that certification, we'll basically be approving the ballot language to be approved next month to go to the Board of Elections to be filed.
Essentially, just we're directing you, and then as part of this, that outlays how it's going to be financed and what we can spend on the ELP, what we can spend ahead even before we actually receive the money through the way that's structured.
Right. So if it's not on that ballot language, we can't do it. So we try to keep it broad, and if there's any, and it gives you a chance to kind of read through it. So if there's anything in there that you don't want in there, so we've agreed with the OCC to do these things. This is what our public is approving our funds for.
That's essentially what would let us start with some of the project prior to getting the FCC money.
Yes. They are portion.
Because we by securing these bonds.
Yes.
We would be issuing them, we'd be getting a rating in late January, early February, and go to the desk sometime probably late February, early March.
Otherwise, we would be sitting in line waiting.
We'll still be waiting for their portion, but
We're there to get it.
plenty to do before then.
Exactly.
And we don't want to do it all at one time, like force us to pay. So the sequence of this begins with the first resolution, and then the filing with the Board of Elections is the second one, which will come back to you next month with all of the specific information that we received back from the county auditor.
Any more discussion?
Nope.
Nope.
No.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dufresne. Let's see. Down to reports and comments from the board. Start with Mr. Nipper.
I just want to thank everybody for their hard work on getting everything together for the school year next year.
Ronnie, your staff on the lunches, just again, just thank you for that. But each one of the staff did a great job. Budget numbers, the finance committee for putting together all the numbers to everything ready. Pretty simple.
Okay. Mr. Sizemore?
Thank everybody for attending, especially our fellow board members who are far away right now, but thankfully able to still participate and be engaged. Echo what Mr. Nipper already said, just thank all the staff, Rodney back there in the corner too, for all the effort that has gone forth to put these plans. I know how flexible they've had to be, and every time you think you got it nailed down, that it will change, and then before the ink's dry, it'll change again. And I appreciate that you've put that in there with at least enough flexibility so that you can easily transition to whatever that next step is and try to make sure that we're taking care of the health as well as the educational needs of our students and staff. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Sizemore. Mrs. Raleigh?
No comment.
No comments. All righty. Mrs. Wolfenbarger?
Unsurprisingly, I'll echo what has already been said. A big thank you to you guys for getting this plan in place. I think you've done a really good job, and it seems like it's going to be able to account for contingencies and, issues that may pop up because, of course, who knows what's going to happen at this point. So appreciate that work very much. I know that took a lot of your time, and I think that's all I have for tonight. Thank you, guys.
Okay. I don't have anything to add. I really appreciate everybody working this weird scenario that no one expected to be working this summer and knocking it out of the park. But I don't think I would have expected it last year. So
I'd like to say it's really nice to meet y'all finally.
that's true. Yeah. I'm used to seeing you from this angle. Actually.
No first time, no better look.
All righty. So looks like we have an executive session for purposes of personnel contract discussion. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Mrs. Wolfenbarger, a second.
Second.
Mrs. Raleigh. Dr. Sander, call roll.
Mr. Nipper?
Yes.
Mr. Sizemore?
Yes.
Mr. Raleigh?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfenbarger?
Yes.
It is 7:30. What will happen, just so you know, I need some time to set up the executive session Zoom. And after Rachel chastises me, I'll go get some tissues first. And then we'll be ready to go to this as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is personnel.
Personnel and yes.
We had a guy interviewing with us yesterday, we finally opened up interviews at the plant. And I shook his hand, said, here's the hand sanitizer, but I like to shake hands when I get introduced to a guy, that's part of my evaluation of you.
We have to open our hiring back up.
Really?
Next week, we're also tomorrow.
Evidently. Or simply good morning.
Can you hear us, Rachel?
Yep.
Okay, now, do we have a motion to return to open session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye,
Yeah.
Okay, and that is at 8:48. Then a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that is at 8:49. Thank you all very, very much.
I know we're recording, but thank you guys very much. I know these meetings are long, but they are necessary, and I appreciate everybody being involved.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, guys.